of the best relationships you'll ever have in your life is a mentor. But sometimes things that are supposed to be so wonderful can be really bad. And so today on Life Talks, we're concluding our conversation on mentorship with some mistakes to avoid. I'm Ben. I'm here with Dan. We are two of the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship Church here in Cornelius, North Carolina. Dan, you and I both have had people in our lives that we have mentored, or I can think of things where I thought this was going to be a good experience, but it did not turn out well at all. And so mistakes probably that I'd made, mistakes that the mentee had made. And so that's what we want to talk about today. And how do we avoid some of those mistakes that can just sabotage that what should be a beneficial relationship in our lives. So, I'm going to be interviewing you because you've done the homework on this.
And I've made the mistakes. That's the bigger issue.
I know sometimes, there's some things that we've said, hey, make sure you do this, don't do this. But let's walk through some of the landmines that if you're going to be in a mentorship relationship, whether you are mentoring or being mentored, what are some of those things that we need to avoid? Let's kind of walk through these things.
Yeah, I'm going to give kind of like a general preliminary one, and then I'll get into a more practical list. The first thing is this: make sure it's going to work from the beginning.
Yeah.
Look, if don't force it. And that's why I always say date the person before you commit to the relationship. Because, look, if you just don't jive, that's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're bad, they're good, you're good, they're bad. Well, it doesn't. None of that matters if it's just not working.
Yeah.
So try to know, do you like each other? Do
Right.
you enjoy the conversation? Do you enjoy spending time with each other? And if it doesn't work, then don't agree to it.
Right.
And, I'm afraid I'll hurt their feelings. There are worse things in life than hurt feelings, and that is wasting 100 hours on a relationship that doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
So,
That's right.
So just kind of to say that up front. And having say that, then I would simply see this. One of the biggest mistakes I've made in mine is not defining the objectives when we go into it. So what are your objectives specifically? I want to be a better dad. I want to get a new position on a church staff. What are the objectives that you're moving toward?
Right.
Because if you kind of go in with no objectives, then you don't even know where to go, let alone when you finish.
That's right.
So kind of having a list. Those you may add to those objectives later on. You may shift the objectives, but at least having it's like somebody going on vacation, getting in a car, and you say, well, where are we going to go on vacation? I don't know where you want to go. Well, okay, maybe you ought to make that decision before you get in the car.
What you're saying is you need to have a plan.
Have a plan.
Everyone that really wants to accomplish much has to have a plan. And I think what you're saying is so vital because, we have sometimes these flowery, ideas of what it's supposed to look like, but really anything that's worthwhile takes some investment, some time to think through. And so I love that. You got to have a plan of how you're going to approach a mentoring relationship. That's really good.
The second thing is make sure you don't fail, or make sure that you clarify the commitment. If you fail to clarify the commitment, you're going to have unmet expectations, and those always damage the relationship.
Yeah.
So is this a once a week or once a month, or is it twice a month? Is it 30 minutes or is it 2 hours? Is it in person? Is it on Zoom? Or is it on phone?
Yeah.
Is it for spiritual development or professional development? So in other words, understand the commitment as you get into it. And I would write them down so that you can reference them later. Okay, we agreed that we're going to meet once a week for 30 minutes on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
You're never available at the time that we set aside. So are we finished? And if it is, that's okay.
Yeah.
And if we're not finished, then what can we do to make this a priority?
Yeah.
And try to re-tee it up. And I would say re-tee it up once, and after that, just walk away from it.
Yeah. I would even say that what you're saying here is really important. I would also say you're not, and I think we've alluded to this in other episodes, but this is not supposed to be a forever commitment. You know what I mean? Like my wife, who does some health coaching, one of the things that she always begins with is an 8-week commitment. And, you can make a decision after 8 weeks. Do I want to continue this? Do I not want to continue this? And so I think that one of the things that's really important is understanding that, just because you commit to something like this doesn't mean till death do us part. Are you going to be are you going to be my mentor? I'm going to be your mentee. So I think, what I would say is a healthy commitment. Usually the relationships that I have had in a mentoring or discipleship relationship I usually give it really intensely about a year. And then normally what I do is I usually it's once a week at first, and then I move to twice a month. And then I eventually say, at some point, I'm releasing you.
Mm-hmm.
And, let's make sure that when that happens, we have talked about all the things, and that way I know you're prepared for this moment. So I think all those are important things to talk about.
Yeah. While it is a mentor relationship, make sure that it stays a mentoring relationship. Now, what happens is often a mentoring relationship turns into a friendship.
Yeah.
Because friendships are built on shared experiences, growth, and a lot of different things, and time and chemistry. But you don't want it you need to transition it from mentorship to friendship if that's what you desire.
Right.
But don't try to manage both simultaneously. I've done this multiple times, and it never works out well. So something is neglected. Or the worst thing is one person's considering it a friendship, the other person considering mentoring, and then it gets awkward.
Yeah.
So I think it's not to say that any mentoring relationship never becomes a friendship, but if you try to do both at the same time, it's probably not going to work out successfully. One of the other mistakes that I see being made is talking too much and listening too little. And usually in almost every relationship, there's a big talker and there's a person who's more prone to listen.
Right.
If you get two talkers in a relationship, they just both talk over each other, right? But whoever the primary talker is, the person who is more verbose, they need to be very conscious of that. And one of the ways to eliminate your tendency to talk is to ask questions and then shut up. Asking questions draws information out of others. It puts the microphone in somebody else's hand, so to speak, and it balances out. A lot of times, those of us who tend to be verbose, and notice I said us, because even though I'm an introvert, I love to talk. I love the sound of my voice. So even though you kind of get into that, what ends up happening is you lose even perspective on how much, I don't know whether you've ever done this, but I sometimes go back through our podcasts to make sure that that we're kind of staying even on the time, because I know that given the opportunity.
Oh, I take every episode and I have a stopwatch.
Do you really?
No.
Well, that's just.
And I'm going to say, Dan, you had every episode is about 20 minutes. Dan, you had 10 minutes and 31 seconds. And I judge you, and and next time I want more time.
But isn't this typical of me overthinking everything? Because I just overthink everything. But and self-awareness is important, particularly when you're mentoring, and so make sure that you're asking more questions than you are making statements, because that's part of the essence of it.
I think also sometimes there's awkward silence.
Yes.
You're like, what do we talk about?
Oh, I hate awkward silence.
And so, sometimes, I don't know if this refers to the whole dating process, but if it doesn't click. I mean, I know the idea, there's usually a talker and there's usually someone who's a little bit more introverted. But, if you have two people that are just both not talkers, chances are that's not going to be a good mentoring relationship. I'll just put it that way. Right.
And you don't want it to. When you're asking questions to keep the conversation going, you don't want it to turn into a quasi CIA interrogation. One of my children was asking me for dating advice one time, and they said, how can I keep the conversation? I said, well, ask questions. Well, this particular child of mine has a tendency to take an idea and just beat it to death. And he basically, I said he, now it was one of my boys, but the individual child ended up interrogating their date to the point where I think they exhausted them. So those things kind of, again, self-awareness is always a good thing that we have to grow into. One other thing is, I would say a lot of times if you're a mentor, you're probably more confident, a little type A, a little, you may be successful in this area or whatever. With that comes confidence, and with confidence often comes control. And I think one of the goals that a mentor should have, and a mistake that they should avoid, is watch out about being controlling and critical. You're not trying to turn the person you're mentoring into a mini me.
Absolutely.
You have to let them be different and unique. And so and my tendency, I'm controlling. Everybody knows I'm a control freak. So I have to consciously let that person be somebody different than me.
Yeah.
And also sometimes they need to make mistakes because they'll learn more from their mistakes than they will from, replicating the exact formula that you give them.
That what you're saying there resonates with me, because I think what we've got to do is we've got to be students of the person we're mentoring. It's one of those things where you want to be more teaching principles, and you and I have talked about the whole Enneagram or Strengths Finder or Myers-Briggs, but you have to know who you're talking with. If you are I'm an ENFP, you're an ISTJ. Like if we are in a mentoring relationship and you project hey, this is the way you wouldn't say this is the way an ISTJ does it. But you would have a certain expectation of how you would handle a situation. Now, there are principles involved, but what you want to do is be sensitive to how does someone who's built like me or someone who's built like you, how do you apply this principle? Walk me through what that looks like for you. And so, that, or even like role playing in that moment. Okay, so I walk in. It's a professional mentoring. I walk into your office. Here's the situation. What do you say to your boss in the situation? Right? If they don't see it exactly the way you would say it, that's not a bad thing. I think it's so important to be a student, not just of. It's not just a transfer of information. You are helping that person become the fullness of who they are in Christ. And I think what you just said there is so vital for a healthy mentoring relationship. And if you are a mentor, then that is something you're going to have to be more aware of than even the mentee is.
Yep. That puts me on something. I want to make just a quick parenthesis in the middle of this episode, and a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's worth saying, and that is this. There is formal mentoring. That's what we've been talking about. It is a we are entering this relationship.
Yes.
There's also an informal relationship that I think all of us should be committed to, an informal mentoring. And that is when you partner with someone you respect so deeply that you give them ongoing permission to make investments in your life that may at times challenge you and make you uncomfortable. I feel like that's what you and I have. Because if you say, are you Ben's friend or or is Ben your mentor? I would say, oh, Ben's my friend. But he's also my partner, and he's also my brother and a lot of other things. But I would also say you mentor me. And one of the important things about having these kind of informal relationships with mentors in your life is that they're a constant presence, and that you also keep people in your life that are wired differently than you are. I mean, I'm a 3, you're a 9. You're a, what is it?
ENFP.
And I'm an
ISTJ.
ISTJ. So, I mean, in terms of personality, we're about as far apart as you can get.
Yes.
But that's really important to me. And it's really, I need that in my life because my tendency,
and I need that.
My tendency is to surround myself with people who mimic me. That's not good for anybody. And like the other day, you said something to me, and you probably don't even remember saying it, but you said, Dan, with your personality, here's what you tend to do. You tend to get worked up about something and you respond too quickly. And you don't think it through, and then you come across harsh. Well, duh. Yeah. I mean, it's like, but who knows me well enough to be able to look at me and say that to me, and for me to know not only, he knows me well enough, that is accurate, but who I love and respect enough that I'll receive that. And then also just how that makes me a better person, just having that kind of casual relationship, friendship. And so I would say, while having these formal relationships are important, don't neglect those informal ones.
Yes.
And, a real friendship is built around a commitment to each other that is deep enough that it handles input that may sting, or it may challenge, or it may just be good, wise counsel that you just won't accept from the average Joe.
I mean, that's really what you're talking about, is this iron sharpening iron concept that we read about in Proverbs. Is, a true friend is someone who's going to make the other person better.
Absolutely.
And what you just laid out is an iron sharpening iron kind of relationship that in some ways there's mentorship on both sides, because I could say the same thing about you. Is there's things that you've challenged me with. I'm a better follower of Jesus. I'm a better husband and a better father today because I've spent time with you. So I think all of those are things that, this official mentorship, mentee relationships, they're phenomenal, but you just need people in your life that are going to sharpen you. And that's so important.
Yeah. Well, so we kind of had to take that little sidetrack.
Okay.
Another thing that in terms of mistakes, and I'm bad about this one. Anybody who's ever been in a mentoring relationship is going to say Dan's bad at this one. Right? and it comes to a lack of availability or flexibility. My tendency, and it's not a healthy tendency, not one that anybody should emulate, is I overfill my schedule. I call it writing in the margins. But I get to the point where if we're going to spend 30 minutes each other, I'll put it down in my calendar, and if you're not available, then there's not another time for another 2 weeks. That's the way I run my life.
And when we're done in 30 minutes, we're done.
Yes, yeah.
There's no bleed over time.
Yeah, because otherwise I saw off dominoes that go on forever. So it's important that there is a commitment to availability and the awareness of flexibility. That life sometimes happens. Yeah. Sometimes emergencies come up both ways, and so there needs to be enough margin to allow for that. Again, if it gets to the point where it's like, well, it just never works out, then there's probably something terminal wrong with it.
Right.
But we have to. I used to say this. People used to say it's not the quantity of time you spend with your children; it's the quality of time. And so it's like, be intentional with your kids, pray with them for 15 minutes before they go to bed, and have, a date night with them, and schedule all this time, and you'll be a good dad. Well, I found that was poppycock.
Yeah.
And the reason is that because my kids, when they got dumped, it wasn't based on when it was going to be convenient for dad's schedule, or whenever they decided to have a complete and total meltdown. Yeah. It was usually speaking at the worst possible time that it could possibly be in dad's calendar.
I don't have time for this.
Yeah. How many times have we said that, right? I mean, actually down to that tone. I don't have time for this. So we have to realize that we need to allow margin in our time, or don't make the commitment.
Right.
And so these are important, kind of like side issues, but important nonetheless.
Yeah, that's good. Anything else? I've got one thing.
Well, let's hear yours, and if we have time, we'll hit mine.
I think that one of the mistakes I think that you can make is you're done after a mentoring relationship, you do nothing with it. I think one of the best things you can do, if you have been mentored, if you're the person who has been mentored, what I would do is pray and ask God that you would be able to mentor someone else. I mean, it's in some ways that we talked about the relationship between mentorship and discipleship, but the whole idea of really discipleship is not that you go and you collect all this information and your head is just stuffed with all this stuff, and all of a sudden I know it all and I can do it all. No, the point is for you to be able to take that and pass it along. And so what I would say is, don't just be someone who just soaks in everything but never passes along the wisdom and the counsel and the joy and the learning that you have received. You have been given an amazing gift. And what I find myself, I remember I was listening to a podcast about something the other day, and my son was asking me his question about, he was dealing with something very similar, and I said, hey, do these 3 things. And just because I had heard them from a podcast the next 3 days, and and I didn't say I learned this from a podcast. I just wanted to think that was
you were just brilliant.
This great of a dad. But the point is, I passed along something a week after I'd learned something, and that is the beauty of discipleship. It's the beauty of mentorship. And don't be someone who lets the flow of truth and the flow of goodness stop with you. Yeah. Carry it on. Look for someone else.
Paul said, what you have seen and heard of me, commit also
to faithful men who will pass it on to others. Yeah, it's a 2 Timothy 2:2. And that to me is so important. So that's the biggest mistake you can ever make as someone in a mentoring relationship is that it stops with you. Keep it going.
Good point.
All right.
Probably the last one that I would have, and this one's big for me because it's kind of a deal buster with me, and that is when you violate confidentiality, you destroy trust. And trust is the foundation of any successful relationship. So if I'm going to spend time with you, I'm going to be transparent and authentic and raw, and if at some point that becomes social media fare, or it becomes gossip, or things along that line, then at that point it's
done.
Yeah, I mean, if I continue at all, it's going to be very superficial.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about the whole trust issue, and if there's openness and vulnerability which should be there, right?
Yeah.
Part of it should be there's a level of vulnerability that we should have with one another. But you're right, Dan. If that is violated, if trust is violated, it's very hard to move on in a healthy way.
Yeah, it sounds kind of weird or corny, but if I open up to you, I'm giving you, for me, it's not true for everybody. Some people are open books. I'm not.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm giving you a huge gift.
Yeah.
It is giving you access to parts of me that very few people get.
Right.
So because I treasure that, and if you don't treasure that, it's like giving somebody, a gold coin and they use it to buy bubble gum.
Right.
And then it just leaves me feeling used a little bit.
Yeah.
So I would just simply say, again, have those conversations up front, respect them both directions, because, somebody bought me a t-shirt one time saying, treat me nice or I'll use you as a sermon illustration, which I have really, really strict rules on, if you hear me use a personal illustration, even with my own children, I have their permission.
Yes,
always.
Absolutely.
But it does go both directions.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a pastor and you're mentoring somebody, you don't want to use that.
I was talking with Joe this week, and let me tell you what he said.
You talk about messed up. So those are I think are two-way streets.
That's good. Well, hey, I hope this 4-week or 4-episode series on mentorship has been beneficial to you. I hope it's made you think. I hope it's made you hungry for someone that you can have in your life who will pour into you, or someone that you want to be poured into. So, I think that all of us have this opportunity to mentor or to be mentored. And wherever you find yourself in this journey, just know that we all need each other to continue to grow into the image of Jesus. Thank you so much for joining us on Life Talks. We will talk to you next time.